Hello and welcome to today's video. And today, as you can see, I am not alone. And before we get into his introduction, I want to tell you that we are actually going to be talking about Star Wars today. We're going to do a series. We're going to do a video on every film leading into Star Wars: The Rise of Skywalker. Today we're going to talk about Phantom Menace. But before we get into any real thoughts, let's go ahead and introduce my friend Andrew.
Hi.
Today we're going to start off our series talking about The Phantom Menace. This film, of course, was released on May 9th, 1999, with this year being its 20th anniversary. Currently, as of recording, it holds a 54% on Rotten Tomatoes out of 222 reviewers. Now, this doesn't mean that's an overall rating. This is the average, not even the average rating. Basically, 59% of 222 people have it rated at 6 out of 10 or higher. So let's go ahead and start this film. Let's go ahead and start this review thing by telling you, full spoilers, nothing is off limits. We're going to try to limit it to The Phantom Menace, but we will talk very briefly a little about future films in the saga. We're going to keep out the canon books and novels and video games and comics. Try to keep it just to the films. But without any further ado, Andrew, why don't you go ahead and give us your overall thoughts on The Phantom Menace?
I think it's the best of 1 through 3. First Star Wars film I saw in theaters, so definitely helped kindle that one. I always loved the original trilogy, but getting to actually see a Star Wars movie in theaters definitely changes that. Honestly, I don't like the whole Rotten Tomatoes thing. Because Rotten Tomatoes wasn't even out then, but we're going to give a film a rating that's been out for, probably a decade about the time Rotten Tomatoes came around.
Roughly.
So, yeah. Can't really review a movie that's been out 10 years and give it, we're going to give it a 54%.
It's got some good points and some bad points. We are going to touch in a little bit on both good and bad. I don't hate it, but I don't love it either. It's pretty low on my list of Star Wars films, but it isn't the absolute worst to me. I do want to start with a down, though, and I want to talk about Jar Jar Binks first. This whole character. You can tell that this character is meant for the younger generation. He didn't speak to me. He not only seemed a little bit aloof, he was more poop and fart jokes, and that's not the type of comedy I care about at all.
Well, I'm pretty sure George Lucas, if I remember right, specifically said he threw him in there to be the comic relief for the movie.
I remember something
And that
about
he
that.
loves Jar Jar Binks.
I remember hearing about that too.
I'll have to say, though, I feel honestly like Jar Jar Binks is the Barney of Star Wars in the let me finish.
Okay.
In the simple sense of when we were kids, as much as we might not want to admit it, most kids liked Barney. But the moment their friends found out, oh, I hate Barney. Same thing with Jar Jar. I think like for me, episode 1 came out when I was 99, so I was 12. And I liked Jar Jar. Now, after watching the film 5 or 6 times and getting a little older, you start hating Jar Jar as time goes by. So I think it was more... I think he was kind of a character that they threw in to target a certain audience, because with that movie coming out, we want to hit the kids and the teens.
Well, I do recall that Lucas said that every time he did a Star Wars film, he did it with the 12-year-old in mind. So it's generationally the 12-year-olds.
Mm-hmm.
But, like, he...
I'm not defending Jar Jar.
Well, it's... Like, you can defend him a little bit, because it's that whole species that seems a little aloof. But he is so much more aloof than the rest of his species that it seems.
As Qui-Gon put it, or no, as Obi-Wan put it, he is the. Shoot, we had that discussion. What was it? What
Uh,
did he say?
he
Another. Oh, he is the most pathetic life form of the pathetic life forms, as Obi-Wan described.
well, the one comment that Qui-Gon makes as soon as he meets him is the ability to speak does not make you intelligent. And maybe that's just inward looking at Qui-Gon, but that's just sums him up. He's not intelligent. He's not anything but comic relief and not funny comic relief.
Yeah, he's the Abbott and Costello of Star Wars.
There were some things in this film that I didn't. I don't know if I didn't notice before with Jar Jar or if I just. Well, I don't know if I've noticed it or not. But, like, he passes out going through the planet core, and this is the first time where I've noticed Qui Gon touch him, but this time it really felt like he put him to sleep using the Force. And speaking of that whole sequence, if they lost power in that submarine, why didn't they drown? Shouldn't the bubble have popped and they drowned?
I think they were implying that they lost drive power.
Okay,
I mean, you could go to that sense of, oh, we lost power. Okay, let's work on this.
I can okay, I can get behind that one.
But
Okay,
I know we're trying to leave the books out, but I do remember reading in episode one's book that, yeah, Qui-Gon basically used suggestion on him when he told him to relax, and he just went completely limp.
I think the only thing I really remember out of that novel, because I read that one as well, was the opening scene of Anakin losing in a pod race, which in a highlight for this film, that's one of the two best sequences in the film is this pod race. The sound design is the biggest for me, and it's one of those scenes where I can be doing something with the movie on in the background, but that pod race comes up, I drop everything and I focus on the pod race. It's I there's foreshadowing in it, there's great sound design, there's characters, and actually there's some comedy there that makes me laugh. Ben Quaterneros, his ship just exploding apart. And what was it? The dude from Ord Mantell? I
I
can't.
don't remember his name.
But he's supposed to have an award-winning pit crew team, and the
All they do is argue, and then one gets sucked through the engine.
sucked through the engine.
And what I find funny is, I swear there was one of those shows, about talking about Star Wars, where somebody had to pick that apart in that, oh yeah, if he got sucked through that, he'd be in pieces. I'm just going, that's not the point.
Well, haven't humans been sucked through turbines and like jet planes and survive? Or am I misremembering things?
No, I think that's happened once. I don't quite remember how it happened. I think the blades were already like shattered in it, so when they basically got sucked in, they just got thrown right through it. I mean, the only real deadly part is if you either get burned alive or if you get caught in the blades.
Oh, that doesn't. The engine exploded when he went through, so it just makes you assume that the pit droid is made out of harder material than the engine blades.
Well, he got sucked right in the center, so it could have been hollow straight through it too.
True, true. Now, when we're talking about this pod race, there's one callback that I want to mention, and it goes back to the original Star Wars: A New Hope. You have the Tusken Raiders on the what did they call it? The Canyon Dune turn.
Yeah.
And they're shooting, and they do that raise where the the gun's a gaffy stick, right?
No, the gaffy stick was the club from the moon. They just had rifles.
Okay. Okay, so it's the gaffy stick in 4 that he's raising up, and then a rifle here where they're going over and over. Oh, okay. Well, that's a callback that I actually appreciated.
They kept to the culture.
Yep.
And the simple fact that Dune Duskin Raiders just don't like people.
They have you got to give them the fact that they can hit pod racer
Hmm.
going what was the game saying, like 500 kilometers an hour or something crazy like that.
Well, on that turn, I mean, if you look at it realistically, I'd almost say they were doing like maybe 100 miles an hour.
100 miles an hour,
Coming
so
around that open turn, I mean, I'm sure on straightaways, yeah, they're probably clearing 300 clicks, but. And yes, we're kind of mixing up,
well,
miles and clicks here, but
yeah.
for those that don't know, 1.6 kilometers is a mile. Go
I
figure.
actually didn't know that.
Well, the Death Star is, what was it, 84 miles in diameter? So.
The fact that you can remember that. Um, so when we look at the pod race, there's a lot of manipulation going into it, mainly by Qui-Gon, because he uses all of these people around him in basically to get what he wants. It's not saying he's um, Sith, but he's not exactly Jedi either. Not
Yeah.
not not in the truest sense of what they believe at this point in time.
I would say Qui Gon is what Jedi were back in the beginning. Before, as jumping ahead to episode 3, just briefly, in the sense of Palpatine going the dogmatic view of the Jedi.
Basically, the Jedi before politics.
Before
Basically,
politics and before they became so roped into the Jedi code and, being above it all, being arrogant.
would you classify him at this point as a gray Jedi?
I don't even know if I'd say he's gray. I'd say he's just more. The Jedi, I'd say, if they really wanted to take a constructive view of him, would have called him a gray Jedi. I think he's still just more. He's what the Jedi were supposed to be.
Following the will of the Force.
Following the will of the Force, following not to the letter, but more along the lines of he's trying to do what he needs to do to make things better.
Okay.
And he's not stopping to really think about, oh, I can't do that because, that's against the code.
And you would say, I would agree.
He's not maliciously harming anyone.
But it's one of those moments where Obi-Wan says, if you just follow the council's rules, you'd be on the council.
Mm-hmm.
And the way I understand Qui-Gon here is that he believes more in the will of the Force and following as the Force sees. So in that aspect, yeah, I can get behind.
Yeah, well, it's the whole
Jedi
in the moment thing.
Yep.
Like we had discussed at the beginning of the movie, Obi-Wan makes a reference to that he's sensing something in the dark side, which would basically be the movements of the Sith.
Like within the
And
first
Obi-Wan,
2 minutes.
yeah, and Obi-Wan goes, focus here and now. Obi-Wan's more of the, I'm going to do what I need to do in the moment. I'm not going to worry about what's out there in the future. I'm not going to worry about what's going on 100 light years away. I'm doing what I feel I have to do right this second.
You mean Qui-Gon?
Qui-Gon. Once again, we come back to the Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan. I swear they're the same planet.
Well, you can see, like, back to the pod race, Qui-Gon manipulating things so he can get his hands on Anakin, who Qui-Gon just little wave takes a chance cube, and he might not know that Anakin is going to win the pod race, but he has this feeling that he's following the Force. But if he's truly following the Force, do you think he would have adjusted the role of the chance cube?
I think that while he may trust the Force, I think that was his biggest mistake.
How so?
Because my feeling right there is he intervened. It's
So-
it's kind of like if you go on the whole free will thing, like if you say talk about fate. fate's a big thing in Star Wars. It may not be directly addressed, but you have the fate of the Skywalkers and Destiny and all this. He
Okay.
directly intervened.
Yeah, because the
The
whole
chance cube,
prophecy
yeah.
is basically saying Anakin's fated to bring balance to the Force.
The problem is like is later brought up, maybe misread the prophecy is. The problem is I think that all sides put too much faith into that prophecy and see what they wanted to see. But my issue is if he truly is trusting in the Force, then he should have trusted that chance cube to fall the way it should have without directly intervening like he did.
Fair. That's fair.
Because in the end, I feel taking Anakin away was the first step towards Anakin's downfall.
Well, there's a canon novel, I believe it's called Master and Apprentice, that has Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon a couple, I don't remember the exact date, but it's before Phantom Menace, and it shows that Qui-Gon is obsessive with not just the prophecy of the one who brings balance to the Force, but other prophecies as well. Now, so he kind of there's a couple sequences where he is either Qui-Gon is either directly talking to the Queen or her primary handmaiden Padme, and he doesn't seem too concerned with either one of them, how they think and feel. And it seems like everyone at the very end, where there is, well, it's not the very end, but the bringing together the Gungans and the Naboo, Padme reveals that she is queen. And he seems to be the only one not surprised, but yet he he throws all the shade at her. When do you see him finally realizing that she is not, that they're the same person?
Oh, I think he knew from the beginning.
From the moment they met, because Padme is a handmaiden and not the queen at that very first moment. So there, you have to really pay attention to see it. There's some subtle dialogue between the handmaiden that's being queen, who's actually portrayed by Keira Knightley, to Natalie Portman's Padme, and it's very subtle, and you can kind of read into it what they mean when they're talking to each other. But to see these handmaidens go through, what kind of training do you think that it takes? How many years does it take to become a handmaiden so together with your queen that you can either speak for her or pick up on subtle tone, body language, to where you can speak for her?
No.
Because I don't know,
We
like,
keep
if there's,
having to go to the novels, you know.
well, I don't know if there is even anything in there, but I would think that Padme's supposed to be what, 14?
Yeah, from what I remember, from the novelization is there is a brief reference to the fact that they basically were pretty much from the moment that she was going to become queen trained together.
Okay.
And Keira Knightley's character, the handmaiden.
I can't remember what her handmaiden
I
character
don't even know if
name
they
is.
gave her one.
It is, and it's not Corday because that's the secondary one. Sabi, Sabe.
Yeah. From what I recall is one, she looks a lot like her, but they also like
They
reference
dubbed
that
her.
they like
They
kind
dubbed
of.
her voice too.
Well, no, I'm saying in the novelization.
Okay.
The explanation that was given was that her and Padme pretty much clicked.
Okay.
So she was selected to be the double.
Seeing
And
those
that's
two.
also, I think, part of the reason behind face paint, because it causes problems for people to be able to truly recognize. So if you get similar people together,
Oh, that is true. Even
And you
even
use
in
the
the
face
future,
paint.
when you see Queen Jamila in 2 and
Mm-hmm.
3, she's wearing that white face paint. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, seeing those two side by side, how close they are together, and with Natalie Portman's acting chops, Keira Knightley's got it too.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to see them in a future film as sisters. don't care about the plot. I just want to see it. Just like when I noticed Jake Gyllenhaal and Tobey Maguire looked a lot alike, I wanted to see that film where they were brothers. There was one. They were like
I think it was
military
called
brothers. Was it brothers?
Well, yeah, one's got PTSD and the other one's trying to take care of him or something like that. I don't quite remember how it went. But yeah, basically they train together to use either code words, code signals, and things like that, or simple general expression to be able to. And I think they even said in the novelization that some interpretation, open interpretation, had to be used. So basically, she had to, if she wasn't quite sure, had to make the best call that she could.
Okay.
So that whole sequence with "We are brave, Your Highness." Well, now she has to decide. Does Padme want to stay or leave?
That's basically her saying, "Yeah, we're leaving." That's how I took it. Now, staying with the handmaidens, there's one more scene where after they break through the blockade, there's that one in the back. When
I was going to make sure to bring this up. Basically, if you've never paid attention to the movie, watch the scene where R2-D2 is being basically introduced by name, because the Queen gets to have her little bit of fun on the Queen, Padme,
the handmaiden,
by having her clean the droid. And if you watch in the background over
it's the one
to the
left,
or over her right shoulder,
yep.
You just see this slanted smirk on the handmaiden that you just go, oh, they're getting a kick out of this.
And I'm pretty
all
sure
the times I've watched it, I've never seen it.
I'm pretty sure that's the handmaiden that brings Anakin Skywalker in when he goes to the temple for his training. Speaking of that scene, I have a very hard time believing that those two characters, Anakin and Padme, grew together in the span of 3 days. So much so,
maybe a week.
so much so that, specifically on the way to Coruscant, I didn't want you to forget me while I couldn't forget you. That interaction, I find it hard to believe.
Well, there's one. You also got to remember, it's one of the biggest flaws in this. I wouldn't even call it a flaw. It is a problem in most movies. Time.
Just not enough time with the characters.
I mean, bringing up, say, Lord of the Rings. It didn't take them 5 days to travel from, the Shire to Rivendell. It took them a month. But if you watch the movie, it only took them like 3 days to get there. I mean, like Star Wars,
it doesn't feel like that series took a year and a half, and it did.
Because of the way they cut things and everything. Like the whole, we're going to fly from Tatooine to Alderaan. It's going to take us like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
That trip technically would have taken them probably a couple days.
Yeah, because Tatooine is out in the outer rim, and they're not. Coruscant's
almost
the inner
the
rim. They're not quite to the core
world.
Is it a core world?
It's a core world. It's
coordinates
are 0, 0. It is considered the center of the navigational galaxy. You can't go into the core, the deep core. But
okay, I was thinking deep core, because you got the deep core as a circle and then a ring that's the core. I was thinking that first ring was the inner rim.
No, that's inner rim is.
Is that where Alderaan is, or is it Alderaan mid-rim?
Inner rim. Corellia and whatnot, I think, is core worlds. Kawat. A lot of the big time,
shipyards,
say Imperial worlds or Republic worlds that have the most power are all like core worlds, with Alderaan further out and so on, if you base it on the old maps.
Okay. So, speaking of world, I don't know a lot of the worlds. So where, the Trade Federation, do they have their own planet? Are they just a consortium like the banking clan? How is it they're structured?
The Trade Federation was structured, basically the Nemoidians were in control of it. I'm sure there were smaller groups, but what world? Episode 3, during the Jedi Purge, you actually see their homeworld.
Magito?
No.
No,
it's the one where you see.
Was that the one with Coyote Mundi on it?
No,
because that was Magito.
That was Magito. Their homeworld is the one where he's
flying
yeah,
crew.
he was
That's
in the fighter.
Cato Nemodia.
Yep, that's their homeworld.
Okay, so I want to talk about the Trade Federation. They're there are problems with the Trade Federation. And I'm not even going to get into the fact that they seem like a racist. Oh, what's the word I'm looking for? Um, shoot, drawing a blank.
Well, I'd say the culture. Culturally, they're greedy.
Stereotypes, racist stereotypes.
They are a stereotype.
That was the word I was looking for. So
they themselves aren't racist.
Right. They seem like a racist stereotype, but I don't want to get into that. I want to talk about specifically the way they're designed. They're meant to speak Basic, which for the version we watch, Basic is English. You watch your mouths, and it's probably just because of the way the suits were designed. They don't look like they're forming basic words. So if they'd have, in my opinion, if they'd have done a language like Huttese or created their own national language, they could have subtitled it and then made it sound or look less of a stereotype.
That is an issue in one simple sense. Nemoidians have a native tongue. So why they would be speaking in Basic amongst themselves on their own ship really does not quite work.
And I think based on who Sidious truly is, we'll get to that later in another video, he should have been, I don't want to necessarily say intelligent enough, he should have been educated enough to understand more than just Basic.
Mm-hmm.
In the whole series, we never see Sidious speak anything other than Basic.
Yeah.
But he should be able to. Or at least at a very minimal understand it, like Solo understanding Sherry Warwick. But of course Solo shows him speaking it.
Could be part of his arrogance, though.
Okay.
His arrogance in the sense of, I'm going to speak Basic because that's the language of humans, and I'm a human, and I'm also powerful, therefore you're going to answer to me in whatever language, in my language.
Okay. I can understand that thought.
I would have to believe that because of his heritage, being technically part of the nobility of Naboo, on top of whatever training he got and everything else, as well as being a politician in the Republic, he's got to know more languages.
You would think.
But he's going to respond in Basic.
Which is what I would expect, is for him to be able to necessarily respond, not necessarily speak it, but understand it. So I think that if we go and just change their language, the Nemoidians' language...
I think it's more a creative issue in regards to the writing of the film. Because, in the sense of, almost like Star Trek.
Okay.
I know we're going cross-genre here, but it's...
Well, not cross-genre, but that's another story.
Cross-universe. In the simple sense of, they're not all speaking English in Star Trek. They have the universal communicator.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, if you wanted to look at it this way, when we're seeing them talking amongst themselves, you could interpret it as they're speaking in their own language, but it's being translated for the screen.
That's fair. Okay.
I mean, if you wanted to get that in depth, but I think it was more like the mask thing. Okay, maybe the tech wasn't there. Maybe they should have CGI'd them. I mean, heck, they did a pretty good job on Jar Jar and the other CGI characters, which we noted watching it.
And it did seem that the biggest problems I had with the character work was the non-CGI characters.
Mm-hmm. But with the Nemoidians in particular, I would say they failed through every single film. Because, I mean, not to get into the next couple films, but they're in the next two. And they still didn't they still didn't get over the fact that they basically cannot enunciate physically of the mouth, especially that sequence right before the droid control ship blows up. You hear him go, nothing can get through our shields, and his mouth twitches at the end of that.
Yeah, he doesn't move and nothing. Yeah.
I mean, that would be a dubbing issue as well as a puppeteer issue, because the way the master's designed, it's got to be some... I don't know how they design them, but there's got to be something moving those.
You would think. And this film, it really, to me, the biggest drawback is, some might hate that I'm about to say this, is George Lucas himself. Writing and directing it, maybe it was just too much. Maybe nobody was saying, you can't do this, George, like there was a little bit in the original trilogy. And it just seems like too much thrown in all at once, and it was just kind of like overloaded. But
I
from
will
a
agree.
technical standpoint, it worked well. It's just the writing wasn't always there, and the acting wasn't always there. But
I
George is a noted and notorious he's for not being a actor's director like someone like Spielberg is.
I I'm gonna have to say George Lucas is his own worst enemy.
Yeah.
When it comes to the films, I'll put it this way: he created an amazing universe, created amazing characters. The problem is the more control you give him, the more he screws things up. I mean, I'm gonna bring up an article in regards to LucasArts' fall.
Okay.
They made a point that when they were looking for leadership and George Lucas would come in, he literally basically acted like he didn't care. They'd ask him, "What do you
Oh,
think
I
of this
remember that story.
character? What do you think of this character? This Darth so and so." And he just literally would just go, "Well, why don't you call him Darth something or other?" Like something completely goofy, and just acted like he didn't care at all. But like he even says himself, "I put Jar Jar Binks in there to be the comic relief for the film." Well, here's the problem. And once again, we're going to jump to something else. Look at Kingdom of the Crystal Skull with Indiana Jones.
I
You
did
give
review.
George
I
Lucas.
did review that though. That I'll put a link in the description.
Um, you give George Lucas too much control over something, and he tries to turn it into a comedy movie.
Yeah,
Like,
that was the worst of the three.
and it's like you kind
Four.
of see it. I mean, all the other Indiana Jones movies, excellent when it comes to the humor in them. It's dry humor. It's there. It's not necessarily, I wouldn't say intended, but it's a prime example of when you give him too much control, he tries to make things funny, and it does not
But you
work
can
well.
also tie that back to Harrison Ford himself, because most of the humor in Crystal Skull, for instance, isn't his humor. Back in the original three, it is. The
Mm-hmm.
original trilogy of Star Wars, it's his humor.
Yeah.
What was that one line? Is everything okay? Yeah, yeah, everything's fine. How are
Situation
you?
normal.
Yeah, exactly. So,
He. It's just I don't think honestly that George Lucas really has a good understanding of comedy. So when he tries to put anything funny in, it backfires.
I could.
Now, with Jar Jar, I mean, honestly, I'd like to discuss him in the next two movies because he does evolve as a character. Maybe not as much as people would like, and people still hate him. But I also still have to go back to that in the sense of people. I think a lot of people liked him the first time they saw the movie, and then afterwards just hated him because other people hated him. And then as we got older, because I mean, the more you watch the film, the more you just can't stand him.
It's, and I'm
But the
gonna
same thing with the
say
Nemoidians,
it's
because we did get
more
a little off
along the
topic.
line of writing and direction. It's got nothing to do with Ahmed Best. I felt he,
Mhm.
as an actor, uh, did
He brought
the
soul.
best he
He did bring
could
soul to the
to with
character.
what he was given.
Mm-hmm. But I will say this: George Lucas did create a legacy out of Jar Jar because Jar Jar has become like the perfect funny thing for a lot of other stuff.
True.
Robot chicken.
Yeah. Well, that this is going to bring us into our last little bit of conversation. Our last topic, which is basically the Duel of the Fates. That long piece of music, which the music is amazing throughout the film. John Williams did a great score throughout the film. But the Battle of Naboo, the whole ending of the film, was the secondary highlight for me.
Mhm.
I enjoy it immensely. Um, it shows every. It's got great action, good sword play. Even if you pay attention, it subtly breaks down the difference between Sith, Jedi, and well, kind of right in the middle.
Yeah.
But then again, it also has those cringeworthy lines that says automatic pilot, and then later
yeah.
on he just says autopilot, and I was like, well, why couldn't you say that the first time?
Well, I mean, Almost on a subtopic, we almost have to discuss the actor that played Anakin in that movie.
I give the kid credit. He tried.
He tried. I think part of it was
it was bad
writing.
casting, writing.
The other was you should not cast your character based on a contest. He won a
I
contest
remember
to be in
hearing
the
about
movie.
that. But it's writing and directing. Maybe with a better director, he'd have gotten a better
Or
performance.
teaching.
But you could say that about Hayden Christensen later on too.
Oh, that's
there's,
another story.
There's films where if you watch him, he's got good performances in him. It's just the director getting them out of him.
Yeah, that's a whole nother can of worms that we'll have to
I'm
discuss.
sure we'll get into that mostly
I'm probably
in
going to bring
episode
episode
2.
3.
3? I thought 3 was his better. Later.
It's not a matter of his performance. It's a matter of who he's performing with at certain points in the film.
Okay, well,
That'll
that'll be interesting to see. Let's talk about
Battle of Fates. Yeah.
the Duel of the Fates. Let's talk about that lightsaber duel between Obi-Wan, Qui-Gon, and Darth Maul. From an action standpoint, it was fun. You have Darth Maul with this. I would say the handle's probably yay long.
Say 2 foot.
2 foot. Okay, and double bladed red lightsaber, and he wields
It's
it
the
like
introduction.
Yep, it's the first time. If you go back to the original trilogy, with this being the 4th film in the series, we see something other than the standard sword.
It's also the first time we see a truly all-out lightsaber battle.
It's the first time fully trained combatants battle each other.
Fully trained combatants with full use of the Force, as well as the knowledge of how to use it and how to fight with a lightsaber. Because, I mean, if skipping ahead to episode 6 and 5 and 4, it was kind of like, we're just going to wave these at each other.
That being the very first one, they just kind of like...
They weren't sure what they were doing.
And you can go back later saying, oh, well, Vader's toying with him. Well, Obi-Wan's just trying to waste time. So you can go back and do that.
But
It's
we'll
fine.
leave that
That's
another
later.
discussion.
Yeah.
But it's truly the first point where you see Jedi who literally have trained for their entire lives, who know how to fight with lightsabers, who know how to use the Force and use their Force to help their bodies, versus basically
A
the
kid
ultimate
with a
Sith
stick?
warrior.
Oh, yeah, true. Yeah, you're right.
I mean, it's the first, I'd say, almost fully choreographed lightsaber battle in the sense of, we're going to give you a show.
We're going to jump and leap and... Yeah,
I mean,
and that's essentially what Maul was. He wasn't a smart Sith. He was a warrior Sith. He was a tool for an end.
He was a weapon.
Yep,
That's
absolutely.
literally what he was trained as, was a weapon.
And yeah,
Because whether it's canon or not, most things reference the fact that he did not have the will to kill Palpatine.
I don't know if that's still canon or not.
I know. I'm saying whether it was
Well,
or
I was
not.
thinking about it. There's a couple things on him that's still canon from the legends, but I don't know if that is or not. But if you think about this battle and you get to the generator corridor, you made a comment while we were watching it that the design of the essentially repulsors seemed stupid.
Well, in terms of if you wanted to
Functionality?
think of it as functionality if you were in Star Wars. If it was a real thing, there was really no point. You got like 6 or 7 of these shield things that randomly close at random times for no apparent reason. They're just there. There's nothing in the room ahead of you that is of any value. It's not like there's a reactor core sitting there that if you happen to walk in and shoot with a blaster, you'll blow up half the planet.
What if that tube is just they're used for like vents to let out heat, or because I mean the final battle between Obi-Wan is on a lava planet.
Oh, I know.
But
I think that was more, we need something to break this up. We need something to set the stage for the final part of the duel.
Okay.
And, I mean, you brought up the simple fact of right then and there is almost a prime example of being able to show you got the ultimate Jedi who's literally at peace.
Yep.
Meditates. Not patient. He's just waiting. I'm going to sit down. I'm going to, as you
Take
put
a
it,
breath,
center myself.
Centers. Yep.
You got the Sith warrior who's literally pacing, ready to pounce, ready to fight. He's ready to go.
Getting his anger
And then you
up.
got Obi-Wan, not fully trained, but you can see he's trying to be patient, but he's also still got that I want to fight.
He's on edge. I don't necessarily know if you want to say he's ready to fight, but I can see where you would think where that thought would come in. But he's like, he wants to help. He wants to defeat the Sith. He doesn't seem angry until the very last moment. We'll get to that in a second. But when he's standing there, I would say that's almost. It's like you have Darth Maul, who is as the Sith is. He's pacing. He's angry, trying to make himself angrier. Whereas the Jedi should be Qui-Gon trying to center himself and be the will of the Force. And then you have Obi-Wan, kind of more like the Jedi are at this moment in galactic history. He's antsy, kind of aware of more than just the Force, and
I kind of want to counter that.
By all means.
I honestly feel that Obi-Wan had the potential to be what the Jedi were supposed to be. The only problem is with Qui-Gon dying. I mean, this is going to lead up a little bit more into the other movies. I'm not going to go there very far. But the moment that I believe that Obi-Wan began to be more willing to obey the council, he ends up on the council and all this, it was almost a betrayal of the teachings of Qui-Gon. Because I think in this very moment, like you said, he seems angry at the end. I don't think it's anger. He's determined.
As soon as Obi-Wan watches Maul kill Qui-Gon, that's anger.
Oh, I know.
That's what
I'm saying
my
is
first part.
The anger turns into determination. I am going to stop this person. And because you watch that final sequence, it's not we're sitting dueling, I'm defending. He's on the attack.
Yep.
I'm going to stop him. And honestly, if you think about it, that's what the Jedi are supposed to be. They're supposed to be the defenders of peace, justice. They're supposed to be able to stop the enemy threat. Whereas the rest of the Jedi, it's always defense, it's peace, emotion.
But it's not until, the only time you see him in that point, at least to me, where he's not angry is after Maul's kicked him down the shaft and he's holding on for life, and then he calms down and is able to beat Maul.
Yeah. But he had him on the ropes during the entire fight, though, too.
True.
But it's looking at that whole sequence there, I feel like it's kind of a battle between...
I think this is the
without
moment...
going into more films later. It's just... Obi-Wan had, I feel, the potential to become what the Jedi were supposed to have originally been.
Okay.
But as the later films come into play, he becomes more trapped in the whole dogma and creed of the Jedi, just like the rest of the higher-ups. Because you see a lot of that with the Council in Episode 1. They are so rigid.
And like
millennia on everything. Like, literally, we're not going to listen to you, Qui-Gon, because you disagree with us.
That and, the Sith have been gone for a millennia. They can't be back.
They can't come back. Hey, wait, Yoda knows they could. If you want to jump onto that one.
At this point, does he know about that?
Yeah.
Because I didn't think he learned
Yoda
about the
was
possibility
almost around at the time the Sith went extinct.
Well, yes, he would have been 880 ballpark.
But casting that aside, it's Episode 1 in a lot of ways, I think, clearly shows that the seeds of the Jedi's downfall are literally planted. They are growing. They are stuck because the fact is you have Qui-Gon who is literally begging them to open their minds, and they ignore him at every turn. They pretty much brush aside Anakin and pretty much insult he's a child, and they're insulting him.
And they basically say, okay, well, this is what Qui-Gon wanted. We're going to give it to Obi-Wan, who doesn't know anything, who doesn't know how to train. Here you go. You two go off and
we're
leave us
scared
alone.
of his training. We're worried that something bad's going to happen with him being trained. But we're going to hand him off on an inexperienced Jedi Knight who has never trained anyone, who just lost his master, who is not even technically fully trained. The only reason we're promoting him is because he killed a Sith.
Yeah. Yeah, but you do have to admit that moment when he's hanging down. This is the moment where he learns
Well, that's his
hate and
trial.
anger. Yep, that's his
Mhm.
trial. Where hate and anger isn't going to win it for him.
No. And that gives him the moment of clarity to think, I got a lightsaber. All I got to do is get up there.
Yep. Now we spent a lot of time on that duel because there's a lot in that duel we can
There's a
dig
lot.
out.
Yeah, there is.
What
But
about the overall battle, like the Gungans versus the Mechaniques, or the Battle of the Throne Room, or the space battle? Well, the space battle, I really don't want to get in the space battle.
Well,
go ahead, go ahead, because you have something. I know you have something to say about that space battle.
we come back to the fact that, I saw it at 12. The movie blew me away. I loved it. And honestly, that's the reaction you get the first time you see it.
Okay.
But growing older, having watched it over and over, now we get to pick apart all the screw-ups, I honestly, it's just, I think they were so focused on getting people drawn into the move, into the action and into this, and we need to get the Star Wars fans. There was just so many holes. Like the very start of the actual battle, which starts in Theed, the capital city.
Oh yeah, because
We're
going
going
to
to drive this vehicle out that literally has this small cannon on the back that's capable of destroying a droid tank. We're going to shoot said tank, drive away, start a firefight, and there's still 4 more tanks out there, and not a single one of those tanks fires a shot that could have ended literally that entire insurgent
right
group.
there.
And it's like, okay. And then, we had the brief discussion while we were watching the movie about the Gungans.
The primitives, who have shield
We're going to go out
technology.
and the Gungans hate the Naboo. They haven't caused us any problems, but we're going to devote our resources to trying to subjugate them when our whole battle was more about subjugating the Naboo for political purposes.
Because they didn't know about.
But
the
hey, let's go
Gungans.
anger the Gungans.
Well, they didn't know about them, and they thought that they needed the whole planet control to be able to subjugate the planet. What bothers me more is that they call them primitive.
And yet they have shield
technology. They have basically EMP balls.
Yeah, I mean, I think the technology behind those is more that I think it's like an energized goo. Because you see it when it hits, it splashes, and everything it touches that's electronics, just like, oh, we're screwed.
Okay. I never really put that together. You're probably right there.
I honestly, for a first timer watching that battle sequence, that whole land battle was actually pretty sweet.
Other than Jar Jar.
Other than we're gonna try and put some comic humor into what's actually a serious battle.
But you did bring up a very interesting point that I've never noticed watching this. Is there is a fist fight between a Gungan and a droid back there that I've never seen before.
What's funny is every time I've watched the movie, I've always tried to find new things that I didn't notice before in like the battle sequences. Because there's one point, Jar Jar is on a mount and he's like riding. He got picked up by another Gungan. Right before he lands,
Was that when he's hanging off the...
No, not yet.
Okay.
It's before he ended up on that. But he's riding along and you suddenly see this thing go through the grass and boom, and he goes blow.
Yep.
Well, what I didn't realize the first, couple times I'd watched the movie, those little ports right along the bottom of the tanks fire like ground-based, like torpedoes almost.
Oh, I've never noticed that.
Yeah, it traveled through the grass and hit and blew the Gungans up. And then of course, he landed on the thing. Happened to bobble a thing around and
they called somebody. It a boomba.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll have to try to pay attention to that.
When they're on the ground, or when he's got his foot wrapped up in that droid's guts, and he's kicking it around, shooting droids all around him. You watch in the background scene, there's a couple points where you just go, that's horrible.
Like it just kind of looks like a guy's going like
a guy doing this with a droid. I'm trying to take your gun. However, it cuts to Jar Jar real quick and then kind of zooms out again, and you just see this other Gungan in the back just literally
punching a droid in the face.
I mean, it's the background stuff that actually makes the movie.
True. And speaking of background, back to the Handmaiden stuff, the battle between the what is the lead Nemodian's name? Newt Gunray.
Yeah.
And Padme into the throne room. She goes in, she's dressed up like a handmaiden, but she's acting the queen. And then the handmaiden that's dressed as the queen shows up and is like, "Oh, that's the real queen. She's a decoy. Go over battle." And then the droids are just like, "Derp, derp, derp," and they can pull a gun out of the throne and renegotiate terms because the droids are oblivious to the fact that the queen went from here 10 feet to her right to the throne and pulled two guns without being noticed.
Well, what you got to look at on that one, if you watch the droids throughout the movie, and I'm going to jump outside of the universe again. Like, for example, in Mass Effect, they have VIs and AIs. You got virtual intelligence as artificial intelligence. The droids would be more on the virtual intelligence side in the simple sense of everything you see is what they are programmed for. So, like when they're trying to escape
The
Naboo.
difference between being able to think for yourself and being
Versus,
told what to think.
Well, it's almost like binary. You need a yes or a no.
Okay.
You either need to be told, hey, stop them, or shoot them, or you need oh, they're shooting at me, now I can shoot. Whereas that whole sequence, they ordered some of the droids to chase the queen, the rest of them stayed there and just stood there. Well, she walks over to the throne, opens the thing up, and then she pulls the guns out and starts shooting. Then they started to try and fight back,
Well,
and then
by that
they were
point,
already
they were already dead.
Whereas her just walking over to the chair to a droid, unless you really program that into them, and you got to remember they're also being controlled by a command ship.
That is just about ready to go down.
I would have
That's
to
fair.
say every single droid is programmed with basic yes or no responses. Like when they're trying
Instead
to
of
escape,
like threat detection.
it's where are you going with these prisoners? They know they're prisoners because, well, I'm assuming it probably got generated out. Okay, where are you going? We can't let you on this ship, kind of thing. Well, I'm going to Coruscant. Well, that doesn't compute because
They don't.
we
know
haven't
that
been
name.
told that you are being allowed to go to this planet, so we got to stop you.
Okay.
It's basically the Trade Federation, they're greedy. And getting back to, when we went on the stereotype thing, you're looking at, you kind of brought up, they're almost like Asian. That's a cultural thing. They talk
Okay.
like they're Asian, they dress like older dynasties. But in regards to culture, I'd say they're more like Dutch traders.
Okay.
Well, the Dutch have a horrible population. Basically, we're going to make money, and we're going to do it either by slavery or other legal means. We're going to influence politics. We're going to do this, and that's really what the Nemoidians were doing. They got a promise from Darth Sidious. If you do this for me, I'm going to make sure it works out for you, so long as it works out for me.
The one. Oh, I.
But
never
it
mind, I
also
knew the
comes
answer
to
that
their
question.
greed makes them cheap. They have a large droid army. They have zero military experience.
And
But they basically
show that.
brought
They show that
the
throughout the
cheap.
film.
They build them into the cheapest bidder. I mean, they're Nemoidian. The droids are built by the Nemoidians.
They didn't buy them?
No.
I thought they bought them.
No,
Okay.
they built them. Well, look at the features on them. They're
Okay.
well,
I
no,
didn't.
Well, they might have. No, they bought them from the. Who'd they buy them from? It's from later film. It's the Techno Union.
Techno Union?
Yeah, they bought them from the Techno Union, but probably at the cheapest price. It's the Naboo are peaceful because this whole thing was.
We don't
planned
really
out in
need an
advance.
army because we're.
We just need a couple thousand of these and some tanks and some things to transport them. We don't need them to be smart. Oh, we also need fighters to defend our freighters. Because the reality is, the warships and the control ship, they were freighters converted with weaponry. They were, depending on whether it's Kanan anymore, which, we get that problem. But in Kanan, those ships were all their cargo transports. The Trade Federation's transport ships. Basically, they'd fill all the arms up with,
Which would make sense because after they transported the troops down, there was only one ship left.
Yeah, the rest of them
when
had
they
to go back to work.
Okay, I can get behind that.
And the whole thing is we're going to transport this large droid army in. We're going to put enough of these ships, which are armed with defensive weaponry, to blockade. I mean, we're talking about a peaceful planet. It's the equivalent of trying to invade Alderaan. They don't have weapons. Well, Naboo does, but
Well,
that's
Naboo
their
had a couple.
security forces.
Yep, and some starfighters.
Yeah, but for the most part, they are peaceful, which is where they have problems with the Gungans, because the Gungans have an army. You know, that gets into the whole tension thing.
That's fair.
But in the end, you're talking about these guys are traitors. They don't know how to run a military campaign.
And they show that.
You know, so they're not going to be able to program these droids into being able to effectively work together. I mean, heck, you see some droids going, "What?
So we've gone and we've talked about good. We've talked about bad. If you don't feel comfortable giving it a rating, don't give it a rating. Just kind of wrap up, give your final thoughts. I don't typically give ratings, just recommendations. So, what are your final thoughts on Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace?
When it comes to The Phantom Menace, out of the prequel trilogy, I've got to say it's probably the best one in the simple sense I can connect more to it. And I mean, we'll get into it in reviews later of 2 and 3. My feeling on it, I was much more able to connect to it simply because of the fact that the CGI was limited. They used real locations, they used real sets, they used model work for a lot of the space stuff. I mean, that's what I love ultimately about like Return of the Jedi. The entire Battle of Endor, that's all model work.
Mm-hmm.
And when they went digital is when I start feeling disconnected.
That's fair. That's fair.
In terms of first watch rating, movie blew me away. Now that I'm older, I've watched it many times, I pick it apart. I'd say first timer watching that movie, I'd say 7, 8 out of 10. Or 4 out of 5.
Okay.
Watching it repetitively, that rating's probably going to drop to like 2.5.
Personally, I don't typically rate on a scale of 1 to 10 or 1 to 5. I don't, like I said before, I don't rate it the highest or the lowest. But when you look at the film, it's rated PG. There's no blood throughout the film. There's no blood.
You got a burn hole on it.
There's the worst word that's said is poodoo. So it's available to all, and I think younger children will enjoy it more than older. But it certainly shouldn't be segmented from an age gap. There's if you look, there's something there for you, even if it's minuscule. There's something there that you're going to enjoy if you like science fiction fantasy.
For me, I mean, I'm going to have to go on with that in the simple sense of I've seen it probably 20, 30 times. I'll still watch it and still enjoy it. I'll also have fun picking it apart.
Yep.
But
that's just what we do.
One other thing to add to it is, in a lot of ways, that film defined some future things that came. I mean, they had to create new software in order to do pod racers. You got engines blowing up. There's shrapnel flying through the... They literally had to build new software.
There is no denial that this movie, for its time, it was a milestone and a technological achievement.
And a lot of other companies and film groups were able to use what they had to create during this movie in the future.
Yep. So, with that being said, have you seen it? What do you think about it? Go ahead and leave a comment below. Let us know what you think. And as always, if you want to talk current Star Wars, future Star Wars, or pop culture in general, go ahead and hit me up at my social media. Links are in the description below. If you liked this, go ahead and like and subscribe. Get ready for the next in the series, which is Episode 2, Attack of the Clones. And until next time, have a great night.